Hello and welcome to another virtual author chat at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and today I'm delighted to have with me author Elizabeth Goddard, whose new book, Hidden in the Night, will be published in June. But the good news is the Poison Pen does have copies on order, and you can pre-order through us. Just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen Bookstore. Now I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Goddard.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Thank you for joining us. I'm always fascinated because authors don't appear out of nowhere. They have a backstory of their own. So, what can you tell us about Elizabeth, or I think you prefer Beth, before you became a published writer?
Boy, that's a long backstory right there. Well, I feel like I always had the writing bug inside of me, and I think a lot of writers will tell you that. And I was an avid reader, which of course all writers are avid readers. But I did not pursue writing. I pursued computer science after I graduated from high school, and I had a career in software through my 20s. And it wasn't until I decided to stay home with my first child that, I thought, now's the time for me to maybe pursue this, look into the writing. And I think another piece of that too is that, you go from being a career person to staying at home, and it's hard to just,
Sit there.
shift gears completely.
Mhm.
So I think I always kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit too. So
Uh,
I started trying to pursue writing by attending conferences,
mhm.
and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to write at the beginning. I actually started pursuing historical romance,
Yeah.
but it took quite a few years of even writing. I finally got published, but even writing romance novels, contemporary romance novels, before I discovered that, hey, I really tend to lean towards writing romantic suspense, adding the mystery and the intrigue and the suspense into all of that. And so I started writing for Love Inspired Suspense in 2011, and I wrote probably 30 plus novels for them for about 10 years. And then I also added Ravel in 2017. And so I think, again, it takes writers a bit to find their voice and find their niche. So I just thought in my 20s, I didn't know what I could possibly do as a writer to make money. So, I thought, well, that's just something on the side later on, but I've got to make money. And so I was in the software industry. So it's kind of funny when you think about that, because computer science, math actually is kind of more of it's a left brain, right
Mhm.
brain thing, and so I kind of function in both places, if you will. But creativity, I really enjoy the creative side of writing.
That's great. Is it true that your mother actually played a role in getting your first book to a publisher?
Her I'm not sure exactly what you read, but her role was really when I was very, very young. It
Oh,
had nothing to do with the book, but she is the one when I think I was 8 or 9 or 10, I had written a poem, and she said, I'm going to send this in to a publisher. And I am not sure that for years I thought she never did. But recently I was speaking on that and sharing that, and I thought, you know what? Maybe she did send it, but I was rejected and she didn't want to break my heart. But I think that was kind of the seed, right? She
mhm.
planted that seed. And all through my years, her years on this earth, she was always planting the seed, saying, let's go to a conference or writing conference together or something. We never did, but I eventually went on my own. And I think that going to conferences every year and meeting editors and agents and other writers and networking is really, really important. It's vital.
What can you tell us about your new book, Hidden in the Night?
Hidden in the Night. Can I just show the cover here? I have an art. It is book 3 in my Missing in Alaska series. And I, in my Missing Alaska series, I have, the first 2 books are about searching for missing people or someone who wants to actually be missing. But for the third book, I really wanted to find or have a thing go missing. So I approached my brainstorming friends, and they always have something they throw out that I can use and toss into a book. And I think it's important to reach out to others so that we're not stuck in our own little rut. You have to get ideas. Iron sharpens iron, as the saying goes. And somebody tossed out, what about a Jack London manuscript, a lost manuscript? And oh, I just jumped on that because I growing up, really loved Jack London. I loved Call of the Wild, and I think that's kind of part of my inspiration for writing adventure, romantic suspense, is those kind of books. And so I went with that. And my main character is a rare book collector, Ivy Elliott, and she's former FBI art division, and she kind of has some baggage and some things from that past that have brought her to this place. And she has to go to Southeast Alaska to purchase a lost manuscript, purported lost manuscript, but it's not where it's supposed to be. And then enter an old flame, Alaska State Trooper Nolan Long, who appeared in the first two novels, and now this is his story. And so together they go on an adventure to try to find the manuscript, and it ends up they're looking also for a missing girl who could have been trafficked. And then they discover a lot of really serious secrets hidden under the ice.
One thing I didn't notice at first, but there's three books and then a novella in the series, but the
Yeah,
titles are rather unique because they all have a time of day in them. What was
that's
the
right.
idea behind that?
That's right. Well, it started with Cold Light of Day. I just loved that title, was something I wanted to use, and I absolutely adored the cover. So when I presented that, that was my idea. So let's just name all of the books, try to find a title that is going to have some part of the time of day in it. And I think it's interesting too, because Alaska, they have some blur in days, with sometimes the sun's just going to shine all the time and sometimes it's just night all the time. But my books are set mostly, or are set in Southeast Alaska, which is completely different than the mainland Alaska. But yeah, it's called Dawn's Hidden Threat, which is the novella. And then Cold Light of Day is book one, Shadows at Dusk, book two, and then Hidden in the Night, book three.
Let's talk a little bit about setting because I feel as a reader, setting is almost as important as the characters in your book. What about Alaska made you think I need to set books there?
I actually love setting inspires me for all my books, and readers will say that the setting is a character in almost all my books. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Washington, and I love the mountains and the rocky coast and the temperate rainforest. And, you travel all the way up through the Inside Passage in Southeast Alaska is pretty much the same thing. I will tell you the funny part of this story of how I ended up writing in Alaska at all was I was living in Louisiana, and I was coming up with a proposal for Texas, which I'm from Texas, and it was so hot. Oh my gosh, it was so hot. And I cannot, I have to get my head someplace cold. I just will create a proposal set in Alaska. And so I wrote 6 books for Love Inspired Suspense set in Southeast Alaska. So fast forward about, let's see, I'm trying to think 5 or 6 years. And I am researching a book it's called Deadly Target. And the main heroine is a podcasters. So I'm looking at podcasts, listening to podcasts, and I come across one that's called Missing in Alaska. And I just got chills. I'm like, oh, I have got to go back. I've got to go back. I've been wanting to go back. So this was the sign. And so I asked my editor about it. And so she said she agreed. And so, yes, we went back. And I actually have my Mountain Cove series. I kind of give a nod and have a cameo of those characters in this Revell series of Missing in Alaska. So it's really fun. And I think Southeast Alaska is amazing because it's got 1,000 islands. It's just a completely different kind of area. And the mountains, it's got everything.
Another way I think you incorporate your setting into the book is because there's the West and Alaska and parts of it, there's always this kind of threat that the environment is just as dangerous as the people characters are facing. And in Alaska, in your new book, there's this blizzard that comes up.
Yeah. And it's funny because I did not include a blizzard in the first 2 books. In fact, the second book is set in the summer in Southeast Alaska. So again, completely different than what people are expecting, I think. I want to do the unexpected, but you can't write a story set in Alaska without a blizzard and without doing winter, right? And so, yeah, I had to do that. I added that. It's just one part of it. There's so many different things. Like you said, the setting can offer so many different danger elements, and I absolutely love adding those to my stories. So again, it almost becomes a character too. So it's not only man versus man, man versus nature. I think it can all be wrapped up together in a fun adventure novel.
I think some readers believe that when it comes to fiction and novels, that writers can just make everything up. But there does have to be some research involved in any kind of book you're doing. What kind of research did you do for the Missing in Alaska series? Were there particular people that you spoke with? Because you have to know about how the state troopers work. You have to know other things that are involved. So how do you get that information?
Yes, yeah, researching a novel takes as much time, if not more time than writing it, because yeah, you've got to get every detail correct. And for Hidden in the Night, I did speak with the Alaska State Troopers. I have law enforcement people that I work with on all my books, to try to find out, make sure that I'm doing everything right. I can figure things out, but they are not Alaska State Troopers. And they're like, yeah, I don't really know, but here's what I think. And so I did get resources, and they were very much happy to work with me to let me know and give me ideas of what a day in the life of looks like. And so I did incorporate much of that into the story. In my book, Shadows at Dusk, book 2, I had a bush pilot, and my husband has a best friend from Montana whose brother is a bush pilot in Alaska. So, it's finding those experts and people that you can talk to, because I'm not a bush pilot in Alaska, right? So I need to be able to talk to the experts. I have a friend who is a writer who is what am I trying to say? Forest Service, works for the Forest Service. I've had an expert that was the president of the search and rescue, the mountain search and rescue in Alaska. So, cultivate the experts and do all the research that you can to find out all the little details. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time doing that. Rare books, I did not have an expert, but I love antique books. It's kind of a hobby of on my own, and I just did a ton of research and read everything I could about it. And a lot of times I will actually find a character or a real live person that I can model my people after, right? They do
Yeah.
this and that, and they own a store, and this is what they do every day. And I just try to model everything after something that's real, so that it lends credibility to the story.
Does the FBI have a arts
Art
branch?
crime division, yes, oh, definitely, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Another area that you bring into the story is Jack London, and he's really a fascinating character because I had no idea that his life was so novelesque, I guess, in a sense.
Yes, yes. I really enjoy digging deep. When I loved his novels when I was growing up, but I didn't know a lot about him. And so, of course, I had to dig deep into his story, and I learned so much. It was really fascinating. He went to Alaska to try to, to strike it rich like everyone else and get gold, but he almost died, and he never made it to the town. I can't even remember. It's uh, coming off my tongue right now, the town, but he didn't make it. And so he ended up going home, and used his stories from Alaska as fodder for his novels. And he's an inspiration to writers. He wrote 1,000 words every day, and he really was literally a starving artist. But he finally made it with Call of the Wild. He was the first writer to earn $1 million. So he didn't strike it rich with gold in Alaska, but he did with the stories of Alaska. And I just think that is so fascinating. And
I,
um,
you had written somewhere that he had like experienced 600 rejections or something like that before.
oh, yeah. So that's why he's an inspiration
Yeah.
to writers, is because I think it helps us, people when they're starting out, to know, oh, wow, this famous person was rejected this many times. And so, and also his dedication to, no matter what was going on, he was going to write 1,000 words a day. And he was writing it by hand, right?
Mhm.
Probably.
Different, yeah.
Which I can't even imagine doing that. So yeah, he's definitely an inspiration, but he died actually really young, in his 40s, I believe. So it was kind of a rags to riches story, but a sad story at the same time. Now the manuscript, the lost manuscript, um, is completely fictional, and he wrote all of his stories in California while he was in California. He did not go to Alaska and write a story or any of that, so I took artistic license, with his background, and added a lot of that, but I thought it was fun.
Yeah, it definitely adds that another layer to the intrigue and the suspense in the story as to what will happen to the manuscript. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about your writing process because that can vary from author to author. You do write romantic suspense. There is certain things that you have to include in the plot line. So I would guess that you kind of have to know where the story is going, but I'm surprised by how many authors who say, no, I just sit down and hope it all works out in the end.
Oh gosh. Well, one of my friends says that, every book is different. Every book she writes is different. And I feel like it is kind of like that for me. Um, Writing, when I've written for Love Inspire Suspense, I have to produce a synopsis on every book, even if it's contracted. And so, I know how to do that. I know how to think of the story ahead of time, but I've learned that even with a synopsis, I'm going to go off script, right? And so, in writing the longer novels, for some reason, I have not been able to come up with a synopsis. I'm not required to. I will usually have a blurb and I might go way off from that. But I like to have at least a loose idea in my mind, a loose idea, of things. But often I don't have that until I kind of start writing the story and living in the story world with my characters. And I just keep massaging it back and forth and trying to come up with things that can happen. And even when I have decided, okay, this is what's going to happen, when I get there, sometimes I change it all up. And I love that freedom because it also makes the story, I think, more of a twisted and more surprises if I don't really know what's going to happen myself, because I think when you know what's going to happen, that might kind of show up in the writing and kind of lead the reader, whether you want to or not, right? So I think it's fun for me not to even know. But yeah, I'm constantly thinking of things that could happen, but I don't have a rigid outline to follow at all because even if I did, I would just be going way off it. So why spend the time putting that on paper when I know it's going to change? But yeah, but I have to have something. I can't just write because then you spend hours wondering what am I going to write tomorrow if you don't have any idea, right?
That's true. Um, you've written a number of series, like the Missing in Alaska series. How do you always know as a writer starting out, this is the first in the series, or does that come to you later? How do you kind of balance um, an overall arc to the series versus the individual stories in each book?
I think I've done, let's see, I've done an arc in two of the series with Ravel very, very loosely. But what I do, since I sell three books at a time to my
Okay.
publisher. So, I'll come up with the main focus as the first book, and then the next two books are just blurbs coming off of ideas on the characters that I introduce in book one. Um, and I usually don't know the arc at all. In the first book, I'll just kind of start developing that. And so once I've got that in concrete, because it's coming out, then I develop that in the second and third book. I know some writers figured this all out ahead of time, and it's probably the smart way to go. But again, with me, it's just very loose.
Mhm.
And I like to say the word random. I say random because, again, it just gives me opportunity to have more surprises, nothing predictable, if at all possible. I don't like predictable. So I don't do the smart thing and figure it out ahead of time. To answer your question.
Another thing that I've discovered, and I was fascinated, is that for many authors, I never realized that character you have to know the character name before you can really tell the story. And in some sense, it's almost like they're a child and you're naming them, and things can't go forward until the name fits.
Well, that's yes and no. I'm going to say I've had, I will start a story with a name I feel like is the name. And
Mhm,
then at some point, I just feel like this isn't their name. This isn't their name. I'm already writing because I got to write. I've got a deadline.
mhm,
So I'll keep working with it. I'll come up with more names and then I'll put a new name in until I
mhm.
get it right. It's just that's a strange process, I guess. That's how I do it. But if it doesn't feel right, I keep trying out new names and I'm like, okay, yes, this is who this, isn't that funny that a name connects with the character that way? But that's how I do it. And I can't not write because when you're under a deadline, you just can't wait for the muse. You can't wait for the right character name, but you can just keep writing and then find the name. And then on the other side of that, I can't really know who the character is until I am writing, right? Correct.
Okay.
I keep living in the story world through their eye, living vicariously through my characters. And then I'm like, okay, she needs a different name or he needs a different name.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Um, I've read something that you'd written, and I thought it really would resonate with a lot of writers because it's so perceptive in its way. You had said that writing was the worst paying job you ever had by far, but at the same time, it's the best job you've ever had. I think that captures kind of the dual nature of writing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, it is, being a published author and writing and being under contract and having deadlines is a dream come true.
Mhm.
But the reality is not the dream. Basically, it is extremely brutal. It is the hardest job I've ever had. I've worked in software, I worked in pharmaceutical, and I've been a mom. All of those jobs are hard, but writing is just, it's hard. And but at the same time, if you're a writer, you have this burning need to write. And so the only way I can do that is to just go through the process. And yeah, it's just very brutal, but at the same time, I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. I am so blessed to be writing.
You have been writing for almost 20 years, it seems like, and over 60 novels to your credit. What do you know now about writing and about the business of publishing that you wish someone had told you when you were first starting out?
Oh, so much. Well, I think, I would go back and tell myself, let me do that, tell my young writing self. Let me just back up. My daughter was 5 years old and I knew I wanted to write, and this was before internet really became the thing. And I'm giving away my age, but I think it was a Writer's Digest writing course. I can't remember if that's what it was, but I ordered a correspondence course, to write a novel. And I just thought, gosh, if I spend 5 years, let's say it takes me 5 years to do this, I don't know. I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting time I could be spending with my daughter because, let's face it, it takes a lot of time. You have a lot of devotion. So I actually did waste those 5 years because I didn't write. I ended up not doing that. And I think it was even another 5 years before I got serious and went to a conference. So I would go back and tell myself, you know what? Do it. Don't doubt yourself. Don't, worry that you're going to be published. You just need to focus on getting the job done. And I sit down at the computer every day and I write whether I want to or not. You can't wait for the muse. That's my big advice. You can't wait for the muse and you can't wait for the time to be right. You just have to carve it out and you have to do it every single day, like Jack London, 1,000 words a day. So I wasted the time and I wish that I hadn't have by wondering and thinking about it. And, I've heard so many people say, I want to write a novel someday. Well, someday's never going to come, right? Today is the day that you sit down and start writing your novel.
Very smart. Let's pivot a bit and talk about Beth as a reader. Who are some of the books that have kind of inspired you, shaped you as a reader, maybe inspired you as a writer? I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, that your early reading may have influenced what you write now.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. And of course that is the love of the stories that we pick, that we love. Actually I read widely. I read fantasy and historical and sci-fi and I read everything. But early on, actually I think my first adult novel was 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I read that like at 9 years old. And it took me 5 tries, right? Because it's pretty thick.
Yeah.
But I of course loved Jack London's adventure stories. And then in my teen years, I read Phyllis A. Whitney and Victoria Holt and all of the Gothic romance novels. And I think those really, really influenced me, what I write today. In fact, I did try to write my first novel at age 14. I just got 25 pages on a typewriter, but it was, a house on a cliff overlooking the ocean and, the waves crashing into rocks. And guess what? My next series is exactly that. So, and nature was involved then too. So, yeah, all of those stories led me to really, I think, writing romantic suspense. I did enjoy World War II novels, historical novels that have romance and suspense in them. So I think all of my reading is really leaned towards the suspense genre and the romantic suspense genre, all of it. So those are some of the authors. Now I read a lot of even I don't know if you Stephen James is somebody I read who he's just pure suspense. And I do read a lot of pure suspense, but in romantic suspense. And if a fantasy catches my attention, I'll read that too. So people wonder how I find time to
Mhm.
read. And there was a period of time that I couldn't, but you know what? I have to carve that out, just like you have to carve out time to write. And
Mhm.
so every evening when I'm done working, I will sit down and read for 30 minutes or an hour. And if it's really good and I can't put it down like everybody else, I just keep reading.
That's wonderful advice. Um, if you're willing, can you tell us about what's next for coming from you as an author?
Yes, yes. I am working on book two actually in a brand new season called Hidden Bay. Book one, I believe, releases in February next year, but it's set on, remember I said on a cliff overlooking um a rocky
Notion?
coastline. Yeah, and it's a storm watching lodge on the Washington coast.
Oh,
And so it's a series set around characters who have come there to hide, and it's kind of near the rainforest. So I include all of the elements of nature that I love to put in my stories, and all the danger and intrigue and suspense that can be added there. And my characters all have amazing backgrounds that can lend to the suspense layers of the story. So storm warning in February, and I'm working on book two right now, and I'm doing all the things I was telling you about, juggling, trying to figure out the story and where we're going, but I hope it'll be fun for readers.
it sounds amazing. How can readers learn more about you and your books? Are you on social media? Do you do websites? What kinds of stuff?
Yes, I have elizabethgoddard.com, and all of my social media is actually on the little icons, you know how we put those on websites. You can sign up for my newsletter that's right in the middle of the website page, the homepage, and under the button that says subscribe. You can't miss that. But I'm on Facebook under Elizabeth Goddard Author. I'm on Instagram under Elizabeth Goddard Author, and I'm on Twitter and Goodreads and BookBub, and I'm not on TikTok yet.
Did your computer science background help when it came time to do your social media and website?
No. You know why? Because it's so old. I wouldn't even tell you how old it is.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I remember I worked in libraries, and that was like 30 years ago. We did the card punch cards, so I'm pretty
Yes.
sure that didn't follow through to present day.
Yes. And then we had in college, we had what's called dumb terminals. Does anybody even know what that is anymore? In mainframe.
Yeah.
I will say it helped me just because of the tech, having a technical background, my thought process and then being a programmer, I had to learn how to write programs. And so that part helps me, but it's just a completely different animal now than it was that long ago. So
I can't believe how quickly our time has flown by. We've been very fortunate at the Poison Pen to have with us virtually author Elizabeth Goddard, whose new book is Hidden in the Night, available soon from bookstores and libraries near you. I want to thank Elizabeth for taking time to join us today. And for everyone tuning in, thank you for listening to another author chat at the Poison Pen Bookstore.
and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you. You were delightful.